Protected Speech with Ravi Kapur and Jonathan Choe.
Alongside Jonathan Choe, I'm Ravi Kapur on this edition of Protected Speech. We're going to get into some of the hot topics that we've been following. One of the big ones out of San Francisco, where a tech executive, Bob Lee, was stabbed and killed while walking outside of what was considered a really good neighborhood in San Francisco. We've been covering public safety, crime extensively in a lot of these major cities. But it's heartbreaking in many respects because Bob Lee was actually a real tech scion, the inventor of the Cash app, which got purchased by Square, which is now known as Block. He's been involved in cryptocurrency, a real leader, only 43 years old, a father with two daughters left behind, just stabbed indiscriminately. And Jonathan, according to the reports, there is surveillance footage that has not been released to the public. He was actually asking for help in the street, and no one came to flag him down. It happened at 2:30 in the morning, and he just basically died out there while being ignored when pleading for help.
Yeah, I think this has been happening so often now in San Francisco, and I want to quickly add that nobody's been arrested. No suspects right now. At least police aren't saying that publicly. But again, the stature of this guy, the fact that it was a tech executive happening in a relatively nice part of San Francisco, I think people in the community across the nation are saying enough is enough. How is it that a city like San Francisco, considered world-class, has allowed it to get to this point? So if this isn't going to wake up San Francisco leaders, what will? So again, this is really a shock, not only in the tech community, but this story has really gone viral. It's a global story right now.
Right. And there was swift reaction from the San Francisco DA, Brooke Jenkins, as well as the San Francisco police chief. But the reality is that we have seen a complete downturn in what people find to be safe in San Francisco. And as a native, I used to walk on these streets as a little kid. And yes, there were seedy streets decades ago. So I don't get me wrong. I think there was a lot of grime years ago, but I still never felt like completely unsafe especially in a kind of an elite neighborhood where he was at. Some people were saying online that those apartments around that neighborhood were like $5,000 a month. So it's not some mediocre place he was walking around in. That was a neighborhood that he was familiar with. He had recently moved to Miami, came back to take a meeting, stayed an extra day, and met this fate, which is brutal. Obviously, a lot of the tech leaders are astonished, and it just leads to a terrible reputation. I mean, Jonathan, you see this in Seattle. I mean, are people staying away from downtown Seattle, like some of these kind of elite entrepreneurs, executives, because they fear for their safety as well?
Yeah, 100%. Why risk it, right? These downtown cores, especially in these West Coast democratic cities, are just war zones right now, at the very least economic war zones. Why go to the downtowns when drug use, open air drug use is being allowed? The homeless crisis is out of control. Why would you want to be around that? These cities need to figure this out. Places like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland. So that's really kind of, again, the question now. What is going to come out of this tragedy?
Right. Well, I mean, that's leads me to talk about your next story out of Seattle, where you once again were thrust kind of in the middle of a story while reporting. Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, this happened just a few weeks ago. I'm reporting on the homeless crisis, and then out of nowhere, a guy wielding a baseball bat comes at me. Never met this guy in my life. Thankfully, I flagged down an officer, and the police eventually arrest him. It was crazy. If you look at the video, they were a little hesitant. They were like, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to arrest him? I'm like, yeah, arrest him, of course. The guy came at me with a baseball bat. And again, it's that kind of sentiment right now among law enforcement officers in places like Seattle. They feel as though if they make this arrest that, first of all, the perp might not even get prosecuted. Then even if they do, the judge will release them. Guess what ends up happening? Several days later, okay, the good news is the judge finds probable cause. He gets arrested. But because the Seattle Police Department didn't get the evidence in on time within the 72-hour period, the judge released him. So this maniac's back on the streets.
So just a technicality, but I mean, they can still prosecute at some point, right?
Yeah, they can, but the guy's on the streets. That's the point. The guy who came after me, okay? I'm covering the homeless crisis, and again, in downtown Seattle, this is a block from City Hall, and this is being allowed. People are outraged. I'm a victim here. I can't imagine. I'm a guy with connections in the city. Even the prosecutors aren't sure what happened, and I can't get any answers from the Seattle Police Department. The only other development in this case is now the SPD has, sent the case over to the city attorney's office for a potential misdemeanor charge. So I don't know what's happening. I'm just waiting for all of this to play out. But my goodness, no one's immune now in this day and age, especially in these cities.
What do you got to say though for folks who may have been watching this show or seen some of these videos you put online, who saw that youngster, that teenager, come at you with an axe, in recent weeks? Now you have this guy with a bat. Some people are saying, Jonathan, you might be instigating things because you're out
Well,
there
I
with the
don't think so.
camera.
No, it
You're
actually
being
happened in the
provocative.
same area. I think there's something about this area when crime is being allowed to flourish and thrive in these particular areas. You have tent encampments that are trap tents, essentially, people dealing drugs, selling illegal merchandise out of it, sex trafficking. Of course, this type of stuff is going to happen. Of course, it's going to attract these maniacs. I mean, it is just frustrating dealing with this. And imagine being a reporter trying to tell the truth, show the raw realities. That's why you're not going to see this stuff on network television. You're not going to see this on the local news, but this is actually happening in Seattle.
Well, I guess my question to you is why bother, Jonathan? Why put yourself in harm's way? I see the reaction. People that follow your account online, they're concerned about you. So why put yourself out there in harm's way day after day?
Because the vast majority of the people, again, appreciate it and say this is the type of stuff that needs to be seen. Because if we're not covering this stuff, you can't hold your public officials accountable for their failed policies. And that's ultimately what I'm doing. I'm shining a light on this. Again, it's almost like being, again, as journalists, we're part of the fourth estate. We're supposed to be the watchdogs. But when the mainstream media is failing and not covering this stuff, it's almost like it never happened. And if it never happened, lawmakers, the electeds can say, hey, nothing to see here. City's going great. But again, people actually living in these downtown cores who are seeing this every single day, the feces, the needles, the addicts rolled over, open air drug use, they're saying enough is enough. So look, let's bring in our next guest right now to get his thoughts. Dave Kerpen, serial entrepreneur, New York Times bestselling author. It is truly a treat. Co-founder of Likeable Media. Dave Kerpen, what are your thoughts on what you're hearing right now, especially out of San Francisco?
Well, of course, I'm saddened to hear about the attack on the Cash App creator. It's very, very, very sad, and I'm always saddened to hear about what you've been through, Jonathan. You and I go way back, and you're an excellent journalist. And I hate to see you as a victim here. In New York, where I live, we've definitely seen an uptick in crime in the city, poverty. I mean, I'm definitely no expert on this topic, but in my experience, the pandemic exacerbated the disparity in wealth, and poor folks are turning to crime. I mean, that story is not a new story, so we've seen that over and over again. And when people are poor, they end up turning to crime, and it's a difficult cycle. And I certainly don't have the answers to it, but I think cities have some challenging times ahead.
So look, you're an entrepreneur. You're successful by all accounts. How do you operate in this type of environment then, just as an entrepreneur, right? You're still in your New York City. That's your urban core. You have to deal with this. We're seeing all the attacks on the subways as well, Dave. Right? I mean, everyone's reporting on that. This stuff is happening. How do you function? How do you run a business like this?
Well, at the risk of being short, I don't take the subway. I focus on first and foremost keeping my family safe and keeping me safe. And we this is perhaps another topic, but we've made our businesses essentially work from home for the most part, and that's where people feel safest, and that's certainly fine by me.
It's a good point, Dave. And for those people who don't know Dave's background, I mean, he's a real true social media expert, and there's been such a transition. I think you brought up the pandemic. I think social media has also caused some of these changes in our society, the way people react to things. So Dave was at the forefront of Facebook and that revolution that Facebook set in now. That might be old tech for some of our viewers and listeners now, obviously for those people that are on TikTok and some of these newer technologies. But Dave, connect, going back to that era, you were one of the first folks to embrace Facebook as it was really starting to go nuclear viral across the globe. And where we are today, like a decade later with social media, with TikTok, with Twitter, we've had this kind of change. Give us your thoughts on just social media over the years and where we are now.
Well, things change relatively quickly. It's funny because you were I saw in the show notes we were talking about what's going on with TikTok, and of course there are some folks that are saying there's no way TikTok or Twitter can go away because of the network effect, but MySpace went away, and Friendster went away, and Facebook basically, Meta, the company, obviously still here, but Facebook usage has gone way, way, way down. And so, in fact, the only thing I do know is that eventually TikTok will be no more, and Twitter will be no more. So it's really just a matter of time, right? The world changes, the world evolves. You know, people would have said in the 1990s that Blockbuster's never going away, but we all know what happened. And so I think for me, it's been really exciting to be on the cutting edge, as you mentioned. But I don't take anything for granted in terms of the longevity of things, because as technology continues to evolve, the rate of acceleration continues to go up and up and up. So things are changing even faster than ever before, which is both very exciting and also very scary and overwhelming for a lot of folks.
I want to follow up though, Dave. I mean, do you think the way social media is today? I'm old enough to know what MySpace is, Friendster, Facebook, and this iteration. Do you think social media has gotten to a point where everyone has a cell phone, everyone's consuming so much media, whether it's YouTube or one of these social apps to connect with other people? Has it changed our society where we have shorter tempers? People are getting violent. We have a pandemic. Can you connect some of this together? Because I feel as if a lot of folks got stuck at home for 2 years. We have, some people have the fortunate ability to work from home, and other folks had to be there on the job in PPE, fighting for their lives, potentially getting infected by coronavirus. I mean, it's been a really trying time for our society. I mean, has social media played a role in where we are right now?
Sure. Well, the way I would connect it, and I'll sort of talk about the emergence of another big social network, Be Real. The way I will connect it is that with social media, people see highlight reel. So people see people's best moments. That's what they're sharing on Instagram and TikTok, previously Facebook and other social networks. You're seeing a collection of highlight reels. And if you're watching a highlight reel, whether you're a teenager, which there's been a lot in the media about, or frankly an adult, you're always comparing yourself and your life to the very, very best moments from other people's lives. Well, imagine if you're having a tough day, tough month, tough year, tough few years, in terms of the pandemic. You got laid off. Your husband or wife also maybe lost their job. You had to downsize. There are many, many ways that people have been impacted very negatively in the last few years. Now imagine that every single day, every single time you log in on your phone, you're seeing everyone else's highlight reel. Well, it's no wonder that not only have we dealt with increasing teenage depression and mental health issues and suicide, but adults struggling with crime, with drugs, with lots of what I would call sort of negative impact of the world. And social media has played a role in that because people are comparing their own lives to the highlight reels that are out there. Now, what's interesting about the emergence of Be Real is the idea behind it as a social network is to intentionally not capture people's highlight reel, but capture just a random moment in people's days. And I think there's something really to be said for that. And people it's catching on because people actually don't. There's an element of the rest of social media where people don't like that highlight reel.
Dave, you talked about Be Real. I totally forgot about that platform. I'm still trying to figure out what TikTok is. Okay, so I'm primarily on Twitter. I think a lot of the elites and news folks, right, the academics, they're still on Twitter. Okay. You've got Gen Z, the millennials, the youngsters, they're on TikTok. I think Instagram is still stable. Like you said, you have Facebook, kind of seen as one of the elder statesmen. Then you've got Be Real, and then you've got a Discord, and you've got all these others. where what would you say are the three most influential social media platforms right now? I don't even know if that's a fair question, or how, if you even see it that way. How should
Well,
we be
yeah, I mean,
seeing?
I think it's an interesting question. I think the true answer really lies on who's asking the question in terms of influential on whom and for what audience.
Mhm.
You know, to your point, a lot of the elites are on Twitter, but how important is that beyond the elites? I think in many ways, and I'm a huge fan of Twitter. I've been on Twitter since the beginning, but in many ways, it's an echo chamber of media and marketers talking to each other. I mean, the question I like to ask when considering the societal impact of a social network and really how influential it is in the moment is, this may seem funny, but is your mom on the network? The answer to the question of is your mom on Twitter is no. No, your mom's not on Twitter. Is your
Not on
mom
Twitter.
is your mom on TikTok? Maybe, actually. Is your mom on Instagram? Yes. So based on the mom question, Instagram is the most influential social network. Maybe LinkedIn as well. Certainly, that's where just about every professional is at this point. And don't sleep on LinkedIn. Some people don't consider it a social network, but actually, I'm going to go ahead and say that if I had to answer that in my head, I would say LinkedIn is the most influential, and then
Wow.
Instagram and TikTok, because those are most likely to pass that mom test.
Interesting, as
D-
that
d-
being the standard. Okay.
uh, Dave, do you think people are being desensitized to all this violent crime because of social media? Like I think one thing that's happened with political coverage. I do a lot of political coverage. An episode that Jonathan's covering in Seattle, right? And all the stuff that Jonathan does, people see that in Florida, people see that in Texas, people see that in Ohio, and it influences the discourse in those states, and vice versa. And it gives talking points to the right and talking points to the left. And then, of course, you're talking about, again, the elites using social to blast the other side because they saw some episode of whatever happened in Alabama or whatever happened in Tennessee and or New York City, and this is how we're kind of shouting at each other at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have become desensitized. I don't know how new of an issue it is. I don't think it's an issue that's new in the last couple of years. I think you know, it's gotten worse and worse. And with cable news, we saw the first revolution in sort of the 24/7 cycle of seeing these stories that ended up desensitizing people, and then social media amplified it that much more. And then the only real change in the last couple of years is less cable news, because it's already been there, and less social media because it's already been there, and more the impact of the pandemic. Again, frankly, I think it's just created a greater disparity in wealth, and it's a lot of people walking around with a lot of issues, and the mental health crisis is the worst I think it's ever been in my lifetime. So yeah, we've certainly been desensitized. I mean, how could anyone not say we've been desensitized when there are school shootings all the time, for instance, that people don't even bat an eye anymore? I mean, that's just insanity to me, but it's a reality, right? So it's very unfortunate.
Well, Dave, at the end of the day, Kapur and I are news guys, right? So at the end of the day, content is king, but we started off in the TV world. Be real, be honest. When you ask your peers, your colleagues, even yourself, do you still consume news from the television set? I mean, where do you get most of your news at this point now?
Yeah, so I get a little news from TV, not a lot. I'm getting my news online. I'm getting my news through Twitter, through social, and I'll tell you with 100% certainty that my children, ranging in age from 7 to 20, 7, 15, and 20, they're getting their news from TikTok and YouTube.
Wow.
Absolutely. And so it's an evolution, and so you just have to like not be an old fart and fight it as we old folks tend to do, but embrace it and really understand the direction that folks are going in.
So give us some quick insight, right? As we kind of wrap, I want to get a few more questions in, but what you've always been 2-3 steps ahead, right? I mean, that's how you've been essentially relevant in so many ways. People turn to you now for advice. You have been giving people advice for a very long time, but AI, right? And social media. I mean, what are you working on next? Where do you recommend we all need to be, and where do we need to be focusing on before it blows up, right? What do you think is going to happen next?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been in the news quite a bit, and yet I think most people, if I think of again the mom test or the my poker club, the 20 guys that I see every Friday night and play cards with, folks do not realize yet the full potential of GPT and the language learning models. ChatGPT being the most sort of famous in the news now, but Google's Bard is right around the corner as a major competitor, and what GPT can do is absolutely revolutionary. I mean, when Elon Musk and other technologists are saying stop the technology, you know that this is really, really crazy stuff. And I firmly believe I'm building a new company in AI called Kip.ai, and I firmly believe that what we are witnessing, what we will witness in the next 24 months, is a revolution equal in impact to the Industrial Revolution and the internet. So anyone that thinks that social media represented a revolution in the way we communicate, I believe that GPT is going to be that much bigger a revolution. Not since the internet have we seen something that will impact the world so much. And it's both very, very exciting as an entrepreneur and as a technologist, and it's very, very scary, of course, as a consumer, because it's the sort of science fiction that we only dreamed about robots taking over the world suddenly seems a lot more realistic now.
Dave, what aspect of AI are you going to be tackling? Because there's so many folks that are trying to, build things to integrate with OpenAI.
Yeah, we're working specifically with enterprise. The speed of acceleration is so absurd that any large organization doesn't have the bandwidth, the ability to be nimble enough to make changes. I mean, we're talking about GPT-4 came out 2 weeks after GPT-3 3.5. We're talking about major evolution and acceleration literally every week. And enterprises have no idea how to handle this. I mean, how could they? How could an organization of thousands of employees or tens of thousands of employees possibly react fast enough to keep up with the changing pace of technology and AI? So for me, what we're doing to help these folks keep up is building cycles of iterative products and consulting and briefing that allows large enterprises to stand a chance. I promise you, timestamp this segment, because 24 months from now, you will see a major reshuffling of the Fortune 500, the largest reshuffling of the Fortune 500 in any 2-year period in the history of the Fortune 500. And it will be based on how quickly large enterprises react and adapt to the changing opportunities and challenges that AI presents. So you think it was a big deal when Blockbuster went under? Watch as the Fortune 500 is completely reshuffled based on who can adapt and react fast and who is slow coming out of the gate.
And Dave, I got to ask you really quick, what do you think this does to the news industry, right? We know that, television stations, legacy media, newspapers, radio, they're still around, but they're still trying to figure out how do we get relevant online. What do you think this will do to news gathering and even the reporting and consuming?
Well, it's a good question. Like many things, it will be absolutely disrupted. There will be lots of opportunities for cameras, I imagine, to capture news, and for AI to help analyze news, write segments, write aspects. I'll give you an example. As I'm a published author, I've written quite a bit. I can tell ChatGPT to write an article or a book in the voice of Dave Kerpen, and based on my previous writing, it can actually and given an input of a headline, it can actually write the whole thing. And not only is it well written, I'd like to think, but it's actually literally written in my voice. So imagine the impact on news. Same way, write an article. Here's the headline, and write it in this voice. Write it with a slight liberal bias. Write it with a unnoticeable conservative bias. I mean, the implications are dramatic when you think about the opportunity that AI can understand what's out there and essentially create and distribute the news.
Scary stuff, Ravi. Lot to process.
And exciting too. I mean, again, I'm in San Francisco. We're talking about some of the horrific crime out here, but 9 of the top 10 AI startups in this country are in San Francisco, and this place is on fire. And in fact, the South Bay is actually too far. All of it is in San Francisco proper, and all these venture capitalists and people who've done big things over the last 10, 20 years, they're out of touch, and they're heading to San Francisco to see what the kids are doing. And they had like a 5,000 person party talking AI last Friday night. Spontaneous kinds of efforts. So no matter what you say about this place that I live in, San Francisco is going to be leading the charge on AI, and that's why we got to talk about these things. And I'm so glad, Dave, that you're getting in the space, because it's massive. And I have a close friend of mine that has been working on AI for 7 years, and we haven't seen anything yet. Like, this is just the start. So
Dave, any final thoughts, man? I know it's super late on the East Coast, so thank you for staying up with us. But any last closing thoughts on your end about just kind of everything we've been talking about this evening?
I think Ravi hit the nail on the head. The world is at one of its scariest and most overwhelming places, but it's also at one of its most exciting places in that I can remember. And I personally like to choose the positive and choose excitement and opportunity. Maybe that's the entrepreneur in me, but I always like to look at opportunities that are out there versus doom and gloom. So yes, a lot of scary things, a lot of very overwhelming things going on. You talked about that in your earlier segment, but also lots of opportunity for improvement in the world and advancement in technology and advancement in knowledge. And I get super excited about those things as well.
Dave Kerpen, likable media co-founder, New York Times bestselling author, and serial entrepreneur. Thank you again for your generosity and your friendship.
And a man who cannot go into retirement at all, right, Dave? Like, you just keep churning out startups.
Keep selling those companies, Dave.
Never. My financial planner said to me, he was doing a model. He said, I need a retirement age for you. And my wife said 55. She wants to retire, in the next 10 years. And I said, no, I don't want to put an age. And he said, no, I need an age for my model. I said, all right, put 120.
All right. Now, and he has the answer for living to 120 as well, ladies and gentlemen. Dave Kerpen, take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Good to see you, Dave. Thanks, man. All right, let's move forward. Good to have Dave on, as always. We got to touch on a topic we've been talking about here for months on end. We'll keep it brief, but I think because Jonathan and I have talked about this extensively. But another Caste case. The reason I'm bringing it up is that it has statewide implications. In the state of California, there was legislation introduced by State Senator Aisha Wahab. Wahab was just elected recently in the previous election, so she's been on the job a couple months. And she very quickly put this out there to the obviously outcry of a number of people in the community, and obviously to the joy of many others. This has far-ranging implications. Obviously, there was a Silicon Valley case involving Cisco. It's kind of been held up, and we don't know the outcome of that. There's been Cal State University that has put in a caste anti-discrimination policy in place. We've seen Harvard officially do it. Resolutions were done. But this is a big effort, and just in recent days, there was a protest outside of Wahhab's office. We haven't seen anything quite like this, Jonathan. 250 Indian Americans, South Asians, Hindus, people of different background protesting Wahhab's office. Wahhab chose not to meet with the constituents and the other folks that were there upset about this. So it's going to come to a head. California is a Democratic state. This is a progressive initiative. In many respects, I think maybe it's fait accompli because I don't see it getting denied. Maybe that's
And when
just
you
my
but when you ask the average American, they're clueless. It's not
They have
getting
no
any
idea
coverage in the
how.
mainstream.
Yeah,
It's amazing. What does that tell
you're
you?
right. You're right about that. The average person has no clue, and
Clueless.
why so many Indian Americans have taken offense is that Jonathan, you and I went to school here. I don't know about your education, but caste was brought up in all these history courses that I took as a kid. And I'll tell you what, as a minority, as an Indian American, they were just basically talking about untouchables and caste and doing whatever they could to basically insult my identity. Now, I had no
Perpetuating
idea what happened in India.
stereotypes. Perpetuating
Right.
stereotypes from a white
Correct.
Western European worldview.
Correct. I mean, I had a conversation with my history teacher. Again, I went to a hell of a high school, but we talked about a swastika, and she only used the swastika in the negative connotation of the Nazi version of it, which is actually called a Hakenkreuz, a hook cross. Swastika is a very specific kind of term out of India. Buddhism has it, Jainism, Hinduism, Sikhism. It's a very spiritual symbol that was obviously adopted by
Hijacked,
Hitler
more
and
like it.
manipulated. But my history professor could not get her hands on it. She's like, yeah, there's some religious symbol, but I'm here to talk about the swastika in the German Nazi way. And so again, when you have that education, you have basically white people telling you, hey, this is the way history is. I mean, again, most of us have been educated as minorities in this country.
And may I ask, was your history professor white, a white female?
A white female. How did you guess,
Well,
John?
there you go. Isn't that interesting?
I mean,
There's a
again,
consistent theme.
I'm sure you and I had a majority white professors. I mean, we did. I mean, that's just
And
how we grew up.
at the end of the day, they're still majority whites, and ultimately, they're still the ones dictating the terms and in power and control. Putting out the curriculum. Isn't that interesting? And determining what history courses we take.
Right. So I think this is where, again, Indian Americans have no clue about how to play the game, and you got to give credit to Equality Labs and some of these groups that are advocating. It's not to say that, again, caste doesn't exist. There is caste discrimination, no question about it. But that pertains to South Asia specifically. Did I face caste discrimination growing up here? No, I just faced regular discrimination. Now, I guess the argument that's being made is that with this immigration influx, they're going to bring caste and those perceptions here. But again, I think there's a way to settle it with data. Sue the hell out of people that are discriminating against you. I mean, you and I have been facing discrimination since as we were little kids. We got bullied, we got punched, whatever happened. There were ways to settle it. If someone pushed you, you push back. If someone is going to discriminate against us, I mean, look, we worked in the news business. How many people in the news business look like you and me, Jonathan? How many people run a TV station, own a TV station, anchor the news? Do the nightly news have guys like us on it?
Right, but finish your thought, and I think this is the point that you're getting at, and this is the key. You're talking about data. At the end of the day, and I don't think this is going on a limb here. I've never seen anything like this in my entire news career. This is unprecedented that this movement to bring these anti-caste discrimination bills, laws, whatever you want on college campuses and cities and school districts, I've never seen it happen this quickly without being backed by actual data. And nobody is questioning it, Kapur. How did we get to this point? That's the question we should be asking.
Well, I mean, look,
how has it started going at this rapid pace, and it's going all across the country? It's being quietly done without data, and in every case, it's passing. How is this possible?
I mean, this is why we talk about social media, because it's the influence of social media. It's very easy to give an emotional argument. I see skilled, if you want to call them journalists or rhetoricians, really, who completely give you a loaded question and try to spin a conversation. There's some very gifted orators. I won't give you names, but we can talk about it on another episode.
Are you
But
talking about mainstream media? Because what's
I'm
happening
talking
is
about
even when
mainstream media folks
well,
that know how to spin.
well, then name them, back it
I
up
mean,
with
listen,
data, make those names. Because I'm
I
going to
for
tell you right
one,
now.
again,
Here's what's
I'm
really happening. Okay,
fortunate.
local media, when they do even cover this in
Right.
California, where it's pervasive,
Right.
the local journalists. These kids are clueless. They don't bring context. They just parrot the talking points of one side and say, "Here's what's going on," and they move on.
Choe, I'm not even complaining that much about local media because most of these guys are kids who have, there's very few veterans left. I'm complaining about the national networks where you're supposed to have senior people.
Well, name the
folks that have
national networks.
experience.
Which ones are you calling out?
I'm calling them all out.
Which
Listen,
ones? Which
Jonathan,
ones?
I don't watch.
Which
I don't
ones?
watch Fox News. I don't watch MSNBC. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch any of these channels. They don't provide really any grist for the mill to me.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, most of Middle America, the South, again, outside of the coasts, they're clueless about this debate. But it's happening, and that's what's so crazy. And at the end of the day, the diaspora, the South Asian community, Indians, man, I don't know what to tell you guys. I mean, if it wasn't for you and this network, I wouldn't know about this debate either. Frankly, I wouldn't care. But this is arguably one of the greatest social justices or issues, or injustices rather, happening in your community. Again, depending on who you ask.
Just to point out, no one's saying that discrimination doesn't exist. There's lots of there's discrimination going on every single day, but it does seem so far, what flimsy evidence there is, it does seem targeted. And
it's not being backed up by data. And to this day, the question I still ask is: the people who are concerned about this, who want to push back, why aren't they pushing back harder? Why aren't we seeing this?
I don't think they have a clue what they're up against.
Why aren't they fighting? They want to fight in court. They're a bunch of academics. You got to get out there and start making noise. And the community against this, they don't know how to fight. That's their problem at the end of the day. This is happening on their watch.
Well, I will say this. In the Bay Area, which has an enormous Indian community, now Wahab is the state center for, basically Silicon Valley. The rumors are that I've been hearing already is that they're going to try to recall her, which I've never seen the community try to do.
She's claiming Islamophobia. She's claiming Islamophobia.
Well, I mean, listen, there's going to be all kinds of claims. Of course there's going to be claims of that. But at the same time, the Hindus and the Indians feel targeted. It goes both ways. And so that's the emotional piece of it. Now, again, it depends on how you can you win over sentiment. That's the question.
She claims to be a victim when people push back. So that's what it's become in this day and age, right? If you don't like something, then you get criticism back. Now you're a victim. I mean, that's unbelievable, man. Where's that playbook from?
I mean, look, I think there is always a methodology. Again, a lot of these playbooks have won the discourse. Again, we're dealing with a different day and age now. These battles are fought on social media. I mean, look at how well someone like AOC is, because she has so many followers. She's able to, get her talking points out there to the crowd. At the same point, you saw what Donald Trump did with Twitter. I mean, Donald Trump was controlling the news day for all of us for months on end. I mean, I know for us, after a few months, I was like, I'm not going to report on tweets anymore. If he does something specific, like for real, we'll report on it. Otherwise, I don't care what he tweets. I really don't. Yeah. If he actually nukes somebody, we'll report on it. But otherwise, I don't want bluster. And I think that's where it takes cooler heads, professionals to say, hey, I'm not going to run around and chase.
Look, I don't know what to tell you, man. We keep talking about this. You're reporting on it. You're one of the few, networks out there that are addressing this. Yet, I don't know what action's going to come of this. I'd love to see you reporting on what actually comes out of this. We're seeing this happening at a breakneck pace. I've never seen anything like this, where all of these these caste discrimination laws are coming in. And I cannot believe people are literally, it just seems like they're paralyzed. Again, the folks who are against that, of course. Now, there are others who are saying, hey, this is great at the end of the day.
Right.
But I'm just stunned right now that this is happening real time, and it's happening to so many in the Hindu communities in America, and they're just watching. And the fact that mainstream media is not addressing this, I'm just stunned right now.
Well, I mean, there's nobody in mainstream media that can talk about it with any authority. And again, I would just like people to go through the process, file litigation, win your case, demonstrate this is going on. We have discrimination laws on the books. We didn't have lynching as a federal crime until recently.
And you know what? Who's allowing it at the end of the day? I just came to this realization. At the end of the day, the people who are still in control are the white folk. You know, people want to talk woke, they want to talk diversity, DEI, all you want. Look at the people who are actually still in power. At the end of the day, who are they? The majority white. And at the end of the day, these school boards, these city councils, these local jurisdictions, they're still controlled by white folk who are rubber stamping all of these caste, discrimination, bills or whatever, and they're passing. And nobody knows what just happened. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I think that's part of the strategy. I think that's part of the playbook. Hey, I don't know what's going on, but now it's become a law. Now it's happening citywide. It's unbelievable what's happening.
I think the solace for the people that are really very perturbed by the lack of data is that when you go to a court, into a court, you have to have evidence. You can't just win a case on emotion. That doesn't work in a real court.
Well, you bet the folks better be loading up on their legal fund. I don't know what to tell you, because I don't know if there's a legal fund. Does HAF have a legal fund?
That I think we will see litigation. This is why we're going to be talking about this topic. Let's move on, Jonathan. We talked too much about that one. Let's get into your spiritual warfare here. Briefly tell folks what you saw. I mean, this is another.
Back here in the Seattle area, about 20 minutes out, a city called Burien is dealing with its own homeless crisis. But what I saw just the other night, I mean, there's this brand new homeless encampment that popped up, but as we know, 99% of these, folks who are at this particular encampment are addicted to some form of drug. And, even the campers there said this young man had taken either mushrooms or PCP or whatever. It wasn't fentanyl this time. And he was just going on a rampage. He was going into convulsions. And I've seen a lot in my day, but, once again, it's the local church ministries actually doing the consistent outreach. And it's been like this throughout history, right? The church is always there as the rest of, the community is kind of watching. So you've got these faithful church workers, and one guy by the name of Joseph Riverson, a church volunteer, I'd never seen it in my life, literally praying over this young guy for 30 minutes, driving out demons, in his words. And I couldn't believe it, but the guy finally calmed down. Even the police came and left because they realized the situation has calmed down. So look, I think for a lot of Christians this weekend, we've got Good Friday coming up. It's Easter Sunday. I don't know. I just saw something that I could not explain. It was explained to me as a spiritual phenomenon. When you're taking drugs, you allow demonic forces in. And I know in mainstream media, you're not going to hear about a lot of this. People rarely talk about religions, even though the majority of the people in America still subscribe to some type of religion. But what I saw the other night, man, I can't make this stuff up. So I'm glad I captured it on video. And, that's just something that continues to happen. Unexplained stuff happening in these homeless encampments. Never thought I'd be covering in my career.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up, because some people take those hallucinogenics, right, to get to a different plateau. And I don't think we've really discussed that in mainstream much. But I do talk to folks that try to go on the edge. And I've even talked to medical doctors who have taken these things. That's a whole other topic that maybe we should delve into. I don't know if you really want to delve into that, but that's a whole
another story for another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into our reoccurring segment presented by the California State Library, which is unfortunately the spate of hate crimes that continue throughout this nation as Asian Americans are being targeted. A young woman in Virginia was horrifically stabbed and slain by, it appears, a perpetual offender. Jonathan, it seems like she was stabbed like 30 times. I don't even know how I'm kind of at a loss to see someone lose her life in such a graphic, inhumane way.
Yeah, well, we've seen the victim's photos, a young Asian American woman, just in her, graduation gown. But yeah, authorities say this guy somehow got in the hotel room, stabbed her dozens of times. And when cops showed up, the perp was trying to smoke a cigarette. I don't know if this is mental illness. It's unclear if the victim knew the perp. But once again, a young Asian American woman, her life cut short. And again, as you mentioned, this guy who was on the streets was just released for some type of crime, this past January. So these repeat offenders who clearly have problems, call it what you want, mental illness. I mean, our streets are becoming the new asylums. And this poor woman, again, Asian American female victim, cut down, gone too soon.
Just a terrible situation. One thing before we go, because we continue to cover these heinous crimes. We haven't had a chance to briefly talk about President Trump's indictment. I don't know if you have any thoughts. Obviously, I had a chance to interview President Trump in September before he announced he was going to be running officially for president. This indictment was expected for weeks. Any thoughts on what impact this will have, if any? I mean, he's always had this kind of Teflon Don
He's
reputation.
Teflon Don. He's going to get off. I looked at the case; it's flimsy. Every legal expert that I've heard, the pundits on both sides of the aisle, are like, "What was Alvin Bragg thinking, bringing this case?"
I mean, there's dozens of counts. I mean, the whole premise
He faces more than
you
100
can't be
years
above
in
the
prison
law.
if he's
That's the
found guilty.
premise.
Well, at the end of the day, when you have the legal scholars and the elites and the best of the best saying that Trump's going to get off. I don't know, man. We'll just have to wait and see. But it's another media circus.
Right, 34 felonies. It will not likely be heard in a court for basically the start of the proper election year. So this is going to be a circus,
as we know.
It's going to be a circus for a long time to come, and so I don't know where this is all going, but it's wild times and certainly unprecedented. We've never had a former president indicted to this degree. So certainly a story we'll keep an eye on. For Jonathan Choe, I'm Ravi Kapur. Thanks for joining us.